Bronze and Modern Gods. I'm John.
And I'm Richard.
Hi, Richard. How are you this week?
I'm good, John. It's been a fun week.
It has been. Both Richard and I went to a couple of comic book shows this past weekend. We'll tell you about that in a second. But today's main topic is war. What is it good for? Absolute Comics. We are going to talk about the much ignored and maligned and just misunderstood genre of war comics. What are the good ones to collect? What are some of our personal favorites? Why should you be digging more into this genre? Getting away from those superheroes for a minute, immersing yourself in the real heroes, right? I say that as a veteran. I'm a veteran, so I can say that, right? We also have our regular features, our underrated books of the week. We also have the old fart rule today. And starting things off, Richard, it's the hot book of the week. All you. Take it away.
Hot book this week is All-Star Comics number 58, a restart of an old series. What's important about this book?
There's two things that are important.
It's
two giant reasons.
First appearance of Power Girl. Power Girl has had she's always been a popular character, but there's been some amazing covers that have come out here recently that feature her. And it has really spawned interest in her as a character and her first appearance. A 9.2 sold this week for $400, which is awesome, up from an average of 286.
Wow.
The 90-day average for a 9.8 is $2,300, $2,385 to be exact. And that's holding from a similar price from 2021, which is showing real strength in that title.
It is. You mentioned the one reason. I said there were two reasons. First appearance of Power Girl, also the first appearance of the Super Squad, which was a dumb thing they didn't stick with very long, with the Golden Age Robin, Earth 2 Robin, I guess, Power Girl and the Star Spangled Kid. So a 9.8 in this book is 2,300 plus change, right?
Mm-hmm.
9.6s can be had for $650.
Yeah, there's a steep drop off on this book. And this book has been, I don't want to say tepid, but it's never been like an A-list book, even though it's the first appearance. And I think that drop off is indicative of that.
Why is this hot now? What do you think? Just because of the recent low variants and James Gunn Superman movie speculation? What do you think?
I think it may be a little bit of both. Definitely, we've seen two excellent. There's a Will Jack variant that just came out for Action Comics number 1053, and 1051 features a beautiful cover by Warren Liu. Also,
low, by the way. Someone corrected us in the comments.
Is it low? Okay,
yeah. It's low. There you go.
Extra letters I don't know what to do with. So
right.
Warren Lowe, absolutely gorgeous. He's the same gentleman who did the wonderful Wonder Woman from Wonder Woman Black and Gold #1, which is one of my favorite books. And those books are limited to 1,000 prints for the virgins, and they sold out immediately. I actually, the 1053 cover, which was the Will Jack, just came out this past week. I was sitting there waiting at 2:00 in the afternoon when it went for sale. I got my CGC graded book. I went back to go get a raw, and they were already sold out. So they sold out with 5 seconds. They sold out of the Virgin book. So it's definitely a hot book, and I think the interest in the character that has been drummed up by those covers, because the raw trade dress variant is going for about $200 on eBay right now.
So back to All-Star 58.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have one?
I do. I have an 8.5. I don't have it on the wall.
No, not today. But
Not today. I switch them around, but I do have.
Are you happy with an 8.5? Did you buy it as an 8.5?
No, I bought it as an 8.5. It's a book that I wanted in my collection because it's, I like Power Girl as a character. I think the concept of her is interesting. She was an interesting character in the animated series as well, which I'm a big fan of. So an 8.5 is fine for me. It's never a book that I need a 9.8 in. Most books I don't necessarily need a 9.8 in. So the 8.5 is a perfectly good book.
Smart man. So today, you and I, today being Sunday, March 12th, when we're recording this, and it goes live, of course, today, Monday. Hi, everybody from the future. Good to see you. We both went to comic book shows on different parts of the country, and you went to a show. Was it actually in Cleveland, Ohio?
It's in Westlake. It was in Westlake, Ohio, a little bit to the west of Cleveland.
Yeah.
It was a nice show. It's a show that's been going on annually for a number of years, put on by a gentleman named Mr. Harper, and it is a number of dealers, and it is a comic book focused show, kind of like how California Comic Con is only comics. There's no Funkos or any of that stuff. This was mainly comics. There was a little bit of memorabilia, but for the most part, it was just straight up comic book dealers, and they're dealers that are regular dealers in this area. So I'm familiar with most of them, and most of them recognize me. And it was a decent show. It was a decent crowd. It was a lot of people there. It wasn't as nutso as I've seen in some of the post pandemic conventions I've gone to, but it was still a good crowd. But prices were a little steep. Given the current climate, I think it was a little steep.
Did you end up buying anything?
I bought little stuff. I didn't see anything there that I wanted for my mainline collection. I bought stuff like Man Thing #1. Uh, I
Yeah.
think this is one of those books that I will buy when I see, and this is a really, really, really good copy. And at the price I got it at, I was happy. Books like Wolverine here.
That
This is
is an underrated classic Jim Lee cover.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think there's a lot of value in this book, and I will, that's going to go into my sale copy, my sale box. This wonderful Superman. Um, it's amazing. This is the
For the
first appearance.
podcast listeners, tell them what issue it is.
Oh, okay. This is Superman issue number 147. It's the first appearance of the Legion of Supervillains, which is basically grown up Legion of Superheroes. They're the bad evil version of that. And you got Superman on the
Perfect
cover.
example of an homage cover
It
too.
is. It is homage to the original cover where Superboy was on the cover. He was rejected for Legion membership. But you've got Cosmic King and Lightning Lord and Saturn Queen as the villainous characters on this cover, with Superman in some green kryptonite field. That's a nice 10 center. And this is crazy. This book was 10 cents. I'm sorry, 10-cent book. So it's really Silver Age. It's just 35 bucks. Well,
Nice.
I always negotiate 10% off. So about
What do
30.
you think? What do you think it's at?
I'm looking at it, it's got some spine wear. So I'm saying it's probably a 5, maybe 4 or 5. And it's not
Still,
a high grade book. It's got a little bit of shadow here on, I can't see it there. A little bit of shadow here on this edge, as you can see.
60 years old
Yeah.
plus. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Legion of Superheroes fan. So this is one of those offshoot books, one of highly closely related books that, for 30 bucks I couldn't pass it up.
Right.
Book I always buy, Deadpool #1. Yeah,
The Circle Chase, the book that was disavowed by Rob Liefeld.
yeah. It's like, it was 10 bucks. I couldn't pass that up. And the same thing with this book. This is issue #1 and #2 of Battle of the Planets. Another book I always pick up when I see. It's 5 bucks.
Is that a Mike Turner cover, a #1? Kind of
Uh,
looks, or is it? And
yeah,
that's
you're absolutely right, man. You are so good with your eyeballs.
definitely an Alex Ross cover on issue 2 on the back. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no mistaking that. But
yeah,
yeah, that's definitely a Mike Turner cover on issue 1 there. Nice.
yeah. For 5 bucks for the two of them, it was a no-brainer. I just keep these because you never know when something's going to pop.
Right. Awesome. So the takeaway was worth your time, worth the
Oh,
admission.
it's always worth. To me, you establish a relationship with dealers. It was funny. I'm looking at Legion books. I go to one dealer, and I'm, Forrest, our mutual friend, was there with me, and we're going through. And I say, yeah, I'm really looking for Legion books. Adventure Comics, that era of Legion. And I walked away, and like an hour later, literally, the guy comes walking over to me from his booth with a handful of adventure comics. Hey, I found these. You may be interested in it, and going through. It's a dealer I've seen for at least the last 4 or 5 years, so he knows me, and he kind of knows, um, and I mentioned that I was interested in this book, and to have a dealer actually pick you out of the crowd and walk over with to you with a handful of books, I think is a testament of building those kinds of relationships with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I took the time this morning to get out of bed an hour early, thanks daylight savings time,
Really.
to go to Near Mint Sundays, which is a show that happens quarterly in Orange County at a really fun community center in the heart of Orange County by Anaheim. It's mostly a collector show. They advertise it as collectors only, and you can sign up and get a table for, I don't know if it's free. It might be. But there are some dealers there. I mean, obviously some dealers there. Good crowd, lots of positive energy, lots of people stopping me to say hi. So shout outs to everyone that stopped me. I saw a few people we know, Diesel Dan, etc. No dealers really looking to trade today. I did take some really good trade bait. I
Mhm.
took some Lamole variants and some Spider-Man high grade stuff, but everybody wants that cash right now, man. They are like, I'd love to do it, but I need the cash. One dealer had a Venus number one slab 5.0. It
Mhm.
was nice. He had it for 3K, and I had my trade bait. And if I had gotten half of it in trade, I would have done it. I would have pulled the trigger for 1,500 cash.
Oh, that's funny. There was a Venus number one on the wall at one of the dealers, and I'm like, and I asked him to show it to me. It's in a bag and board. So he reaches up, pulls it down. It's just the cover.
Uh,
It's just the cover. And it was still like $300.
that must be why you didn't text me. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
you are forgiven. Uh, One interesting thing, it's funny you say that because it wasn't slabbed. It was just a cover, like you're saying. I heard more than one person, dealer and collector, going through the bins, just talking in general, saying they're not buying slabs anymore. Raws are where it's at. I don't know. I didn't really get into an investigative report about why they were thinking that, but a lot of people, more than three or four that I talked to, it was weird. All kind of said the same thing, that they're not either able to sell slabs now, they're selling raws like there's no tomorrow,
Mhm.
or they're not looking for slabs to buy. They are buying raws. So
Speaking of
that's
that, hate to walk all over your
good.
your particular thing. I was at one of my favorite dealers, the Nerd Box, who is a dealer there, and great guys, great set of books. If you guys are looking for a comic book store, they have an actual physical location as well. But anyway, they guy walks up with a backpack, and he pulls out of his backpack a Spider-Man number one, and is
Boom.
looking to sell it. He, and the guys there, it's raw. It's just this raw. He also has a Hulk number one, uh, an Avenger number one, and then another Avenger number one, like with no backing board. It's just in a bag with no backing board.
I'm
And
giving you a side eye already. Go on.
oh my goodness, you would have thought he brought the royal jewels, because everybody, he had our friend Eric from Comics Are Go comes over and he's inspecting it with the light, and they're looking for all the things that you look for in a raw book, especially one of those eras. You're looking for trimming around the edges. You're looking carefully for color touch, because those books are notorious, especially that Hulk book is notorious for those kind of things. And they're counting pages and they're doing everything possible to validate, because the guy wanted 10 grand for the Spider-Man. I didn't hear what he wanted for the Hulk. Um, he was countered with 6,500. He didn't want that, but they were trying to figure out some price. But before you drop those kind of numbers, you want to verify the book. And
How
the
they look.
they looked okay. They looked about, our friend
Ish.
Eric gave it about 2.5 to 3 for
Oh,
the
okay.
Hulk. I mean, they weren't mint books. This guy was not. From the looks of it, he wasn't a collector. These are books that either he came across or he's had for years. He wanted to get rid of them. He didn't
Or
really,
skull.
potentially. I always look at the bright side of things. Uh,
Sorry.
but it was interesting to see these books in the raw, because you rarely see a Hulk number one just flopping around there
Right,
in
right.
in a bag and board. And he had those, and I don't know what else he had in that backpack. I was waiting for him to pull something else out, but no, he had all the dealers clustered around, and they're trying to authenticate this book, because it was a potential purchase there. And that's the one thing that graded books give you is at least some validated eyes on the book. I'm now recently I can see your smirk on your face. You're
In
kind of scared
theory.
close. Yeah. But at least somebody's looked at it for color, touch, for trim, for all those kinds of things, and you get that third party impartial review of the book. So if you're buying a Hulk 181 that's a 2.5 blue label, you are pretty much guaranteed that it's of that kind of quality at the minimum.
Right.
And you don't have that when you get these books raw. So it was just fun to watch dealers go through the process of inspecting the book.
So what's the end here? Don't leave me hanging. Did anybody buy the books? What's going on?
It had not been there. No deal had been made by the time I left. I was an hour later before I left, and they were still the guy from Nerdbox was gone, and the guy with the comics were gone. Um, so I don't know. Some other negotiations were going on. The guy wasn't interested in trading. He wanted cash, and Nerdbox may have gone over to the bank to get cash for all I know.
Ask for an ID, ask for a bill of sale. I'm telling you, I would be like, something stinks. Well, to better news, I did get a few. I didn't buy a lot. Honestly, to be honest, I kind of wasn't feeling it. I was there really
Same
to
here.
hang out,
Yeah.
but I got a few deals. I'm missing this book. I had no idea I was missing this book, and I'm glad I looked in my Wacom app to see Captain America 275.
You
This
don't
is
have that
I
book?
I don't have a copy of this. This is the first appearance of Helmut Zemo,
Mhm.
the original Zemo's son as Zemo. He actually was in 168 as the Phoenix, not that Phoenix. Um, and this is the first appearance of Baron Zemo #2. As big as a Captain America fan and a Thunderbolts fan that I am, you would think I would have multiples of this book, but
Yeah.
this is
I've
the
got 2
only.
copies of it.
No one asked you, Richard. This is my time to shine.
It's true.
Uh, I kid. Do you have a 9.8? Because I'll take it.
No, I don't, unfortunately. What else did you get?
So part of the infamy of being on this show is that people see me, dealers see me, and they go, I've got something for you, John. And 9 times out of 10, they're right. I'm just going to hold up a copy of Lidsville #1
That is you all over.
that was basically handed to me. I know you want to buy this, John. And I said, yes, I do. So I now can check Lidsville #1, put it next to my Scooby Doo #1 and my Lancelot Link #1.
For those who are on the podcast, Lidsville is a comic book about a TV show from the early 70s where it was hats walking and yes,
These
anthropomorphic
giant
hats.
hats. Uh, I call it acid for kids. Uh, drop
I
some
remember
and
that show with Crofted Super Show, yeah.
uh, Lidsville is the kookiest. Lidsville is the zaniest. Another dealer saw me and said, I know I watch your show. You're looking for two things. And I said, yes, what are they? Venuses, which I don't have. Okay, good. Check. Good. And Looney Tunes. And I said, yes, I am looking for Looney Tunes. He goes, well, I don't have those either. But I have this.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome Back Cotter #1, or as I call it, first appearance of John Travolta in comics.
Yes,
And,
that's very true.
uh, and this is, I'm going to I'm going to take this with me to WonderCon to drop it off at the CGC booth. I think this is at least 9.4 outside shot after a press and clean at 9.6, 9.8. And,
Nice.
you know, I will walk around here bragging all day about my 9.8 Welcome Back Cotter if that happens. And I also have another book that I'm going to save for my underrated book of the week later
Oh,
that I got today. So there you go. It also has to do with our main topic today, which is This Means War, our favorite war comics. We're going to talk about this underserved genre. Richard, why do you think people aren't into war comics anymore? They used to be very, very popular. It was one of the main genres.
war and Western comics used to be very popular. I think it's a different. Um, People have been conditioned for comics to be about superheroes because of the popularity of Marvel and Superman, and so when you say comic books, that's what people think
Yep.
today. back in the 50s when Roy Rogers was on TV and the Lone Ranger and um, it was a different world and people were thinking about westerns and things like that. Also, the Second World War was a closer event, and I think people had um, a stronger tie to those events than they have now. And so you had comics on the Second World War or the
Mm.
Korean War. They were more visceral, and I think again people had a stronger connection to that era, either through their parents or grandparents.
You beat me to it. I was going to say, I think one of the reasons is we haven't had a real good war in a long time. And by that, I mean, we don't have a common enemy. I mean, World
Right,
War II, Hitler,
right,
Mussolini, Korean War, communism, the Reds. Gulf War, it was split. Are we fighting for oil? Are we, it wasn't as clean and cut and dried. So the fantasy appeal of being a hero and putting on your uniform, it lost something in the Vietnam War, even
right,
especially.
right. Yeah, you had the whole black hat, white hat
Yeah,
concept where you were the white hat, and then there was a clear and defined enemy that were the black hat, and you can hate and kill and all those things to that enemy, um, and wake up next morning and have breakfast,
right.
reading it in a comic book. Um, and the wars recently have been less clear cut as to us as the good guys, and then there is that definitive bad guy.
Lots
So
of shades of gray, and yeah,
yeah,
the market's just not going to support it. Let's be honest.
yeah.
But there are some weirdos out there like you and I that collect war comics. And what's your first one? We've picked a few.
Yeah, we picked a few, and my when you had this assignment earlier this week talking about war books, and I had to think about it. To me, war books mean a lot of different things, and I think my books are a little bit more around, scattered than your particular picks. But my first book is, I think, is a staple, which is GI Combat number 87 from
Mm.
1961. It's the first appearance of the Haunted Tank. Um, Now this is a haircut book for me. When I was young, my father would take me to go get my hair cut. There would be a stack of comic books sitting next to in the waiting area, and you'd sit there and read comics. I was reading Commandy, but there's a stack of war books, and this is one of the war books. Not this one particularly, but books about the haunted tank were pretty prevalent. So this is the first appearance, and it's also a gorgeous cover. You've got all these dive bombers streaking down. Uh,
Classic gray tone cover,
it's
beautiful.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cover. I love it for that as well. But the haunted tank is a tank haunted by the spirits of the Confederate General Jeb Stuart. Um, it's a strange story how it came about. Alexander the Great assigned Jeb Stuart to look over his ancestor, also named Jeb Stuart, or his relative also named Jeb Stewart. And so the tank is haunted by this spirit, and they go through a variety of adventures.
Smells like Robert Kanigher to me.
It's weird. It's one of those books it's a part of a particular era. All these early war books are
Nothing like making a Confederate general the hero of the book, but
right, exactly. That's my point. But he's also driving a tank named the Stuart,
sure,
which is also
sure.
named after the Confederate general. Which
Nothing
strangely,
problematic about that. Hmm.
yeah, there's some problem when you read these older books, especially war books, because war books have when they have an a villain, they are stereotypical in a lot of cases.
Oh, we'll get to that in my Atlas section.
And that's part of that. It's part of the environment. You can't take the book out of the environment it was created in. And so you would think I would have problems with the Confederate general as one of the main characters in the story, but I don't. This is an interesting book. It's a part of the history of comics. Later on in 2008, they had a later version where Jeb Stewart is haunting a Abrams tank, and he's protecting his descendant, now an African American,
Ah, there's your revenge. Haha.
which I can pretty much picture it. It's interesting. I've read that series. I've read at least a few books of the series. There is friction at the beginning of the relationship, but both parties seem to accept it and move forward. And it's an interesting story. So yeah, GI Comics 87 is the first appearance of the Honda tank is my first pick.
Yeah, Jamal Stewart. It's like your great great granddaughter didn't have any problem with it, buddy. I want to be there for that conversation. My first pick, no surprise to anyone that is a longtime listener of this podcast or a longtime viewer on YouTube, are Fighting Forces issues 151 to 162. Why? Under this unassuming Joe Kubert cover for issue 151 lies the first issue that is written, penciled, and edited by Jack King Kirby. Now, how did Jack Kirby end up on our Fighting Forces, drawing and writing the losers? Well, after the cancellation of the New Gods and the Demon, Kirby had a contract with Carmine Infantino in DC Comics. He had to do X number of pages per month, and he needed an assignment. He didn't want to take work away from anyone else. So when our Fighting Forces lost a creative team, it went over to Jack. Um, Not the most Jack Kirby of books you would think until you look at Jack's history, which we'll touch on a little bit later when we talk about the 50s. But these are very personal stories from Jack Kirby's own war experiences. He was in World War II. He almost lost toes to frostbite from trench foot. You have personal war experiences, very, very good small stakes stories, next to crazy stuff like a story about the Devastator, this giant fake war machine that was manufactured to trick the Nazis, inspired by a comic book. And you're like, okay, Jack, settle down. Now, Kirby on this book actually jump started sales. It was a bi-monthly when Kirby took over. The book did go monthly while he was editing it, so sales were there. But longtime fans of the losers that were around before Jack were absolutely confused. You read the letters page and it's people complaining, I like Jack, but what happened to this subplot dealing with Captain Storm's girlfriend? What happened to this subplot? Jack, when he took over a book, it was like when he took over Black Panther, it was like all that stuff that happened before. I don't care. Here's my version of this. So these never got addressed during Jack's run. When Jack left the book of 162, the old writer Robert Kanigher, our friend Robert, comes on at 163 and immediately starts the subplots up again where they were left off. It's pretty funny. But yeah, our Fighting Forces, tough books in grade. If you ever see them in high grade, grab them because they are very, very scarce. These books were read, abused, thrown around in quarter boxes, like we say. So if you are a Jack fan and a war fan, these are must-haves.
Excellent pick.
You've got another one here that I think you've talked about before on the show.
I have. I've talked about a specific issue of this book. This is Luftwaffe 1946 from Families of Altered Wars. This is a Arctic Press book. It's tough to get information about this book. I was doing my research on it for this. It's hard to track down. This book is there's a problematic cover, by the way. It's got a nice Nazi eagle with a swastika on the cover, prominently. Yeah, that's pretty much all the cover is. But the first issues were first from 1996. There was a 4-issue limited series, and then that was popular enough that they did an 18-issue full series, and then they did other. The book that I featured in my underrated book was the technical
Oh,
manual,
right. Yeah.
which details, the premises. The Second World War continued after 1945 because of Nazi superweapons, basically. Various aircraft and tanks and things that caused them to extend the war. And the story is about those kinds of pieces of technology and what happens after 1945. I am a big fan of history, especially military aviation, and you get to see all kinds of planes that were just in blueprint stage or even just design stage, actually flown. In the book, they're flown by pilots, and they are part of the army of the Third Reich. And it's interesting to see these jets and other things fly. but it's also, this is an anime book. This is not, this isn't, you don't have gritty realism for this. This is anime for the most part.
It's Antarctic Press, though, right? I mean, it's the same company that did Ninja High School, and not Ninja High School for people that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the focus of the book, at least in the art style, is just like another pick that I'm going to have here soon. Is they very lovingly detail the planes that
Mhm.
are part of this, and the war machinery is lovingly drawn to high detail. Um, the characters not so much. I think they really, it shows the focus of the story. It's an interesting story. It's not a memorable story. What really comes across for this is those vehicles, and I love the series for that. They did that regular series run for 18 issues, but it's from 1997 to 2000, so it wasn't like a regular thing. I think it may have been more of a quarterly thing. It is hard to find this book. There are no books on GPA. Well, there's one sale for GPA for $49 for number one. But that's it. I mean, there are no other sales for this book. So I come across these books in dollar bins before, at least some of the later ones. I've never come across the number one. I don't know if it's the size of the print run or what, but if you see these, pick them up. I think you'd enjoy them.
Yeah, interesting cross of manga and war.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But you know what? It's, if any group of people can talk about war on a horror level, it's the Japanese,
Yeah.
and I think they drew on some of that kind of internal knowledge, and were able to produce books like this.
Uh, Maybe an awkwardish segue into my next pick, which is the various titles that Atlas Comics published in the 50s. You had several different types of war comics from Atlas. Stanley and company were churning them out. You had things like Battle, Battlefront, Battlefield, War, um, the
War
thing,
Battle.
War Battle, more Battle War. The thing about these fantastic art inside by people like John Severin, Dave Berg, Robert Q. Sale, Russ Heath, just really brutal covers too. They were not too. I'm going to probably regret saying this because people in the comments going to give me like 9,000 examples that prove me wrong. Honestly don't think they were too brutal with the racial stereotypes and depictions. The Koreans, it was at the height of the Korean War. They look human. They don't look inhuman or cartoony. However, the dialogue and the situations are absolutely racist. there's no denying that. But you had the GIs were always kind of like on the covers like, haha, Koreans are stupid, look at us, we're this cover to Battlefront where they're shooting over their heads. And then this great Combat Kelly cover that I'm showing you, not only because it's funny but because it's in beautiful condition. um the Korean soldiers like, chow, come and get it. They kill the Koreans and say, haha, we ate 10 minutes ago. Morons. But this is a beautiful, look at that.
That is a beautiful cover.
Let me see if I can show you. For a black cover, it's
Mhm.
gorgeous. Uh, but the Atlas War comics are really uh, just a snapshot of our country in the 50s. It's, rah, rah, down with the Reds, which kind of continued all the way into the Marvel age with the early Marvel superheroes. How many times did Iron Man fight the Reds, or the Hulk is up against Mongol, the Red?
Yeah, again, it's the, black hat, white hat. We as Americans have taken, even the First World War, the Hun. They're stereotypical, and you try to dehumanize the opponent.
It's
So
propaganda.
yeah, yeah, and that's part of the war footing, and that ends up being a part of comics. So again, like you say, it's a period thing, and you can't separate it and judge it by anything other than putting it in that period.
Luckily, we in America are so evolved today that we don't use propaganda to diminish anyone else's rights within this nation.
Moving along, my next pick is another anime comic. It's another one of my favorite of mine. I've talked about this before. It's Area 88, number one from 1987. This is a real cool book. Again, it's an anime book. It's actually a serialized. It's a comic of a serialized story told in 1979 about a Japanese pilot who's tricked into a 3-year contract with this mercenary air force.
Ooh.
Uh, he tries to buy his. He has to raise $1.5 million to buy himself out of the contract, and he flies a variety of planes against a variety of planes in this war with this other nation. He gets paid by the kill, so every time he shoots a plane down, he makes money. And the story's about him and his fiance, and him trying to get back to her, get back to his life, and him accepting the brutal reality that he has found himself in place. It's another book that has more story than Luftwaffe had. It went on for a number of issues. I have a full run. I did not write down what the last issue number was, but it's a large run. Um, it focuses on the planes. He flies a variety of jets, from American jets, European jets, um, Russian jets. Then all these planes are very lovingly drawn in this book. It's all black and white, but it's a great. It's more, like I said, it's more interesting of a story than Luftwaffe was. And you can find these all the time in dollar bins. You'll find them all over the place. And I think it's a great read. It's a serialized story, so you can start number one and work your way through. And I think you're best served doing that. If you come across a run, I think I bought my run for less than $50.
Hmm.
Do it, because it's a great story. If you like anime, you can buy this run at a reasonable price.
That was part of Eclipse's first foray into reprinting manga. They did this. They did My the Psychic Girl. I think they all ran for like 36 issues, 3 years.
Mai is
Uh,
another great series if you
yeah,
haven't read
My
it.
is great. Oh man, do you know there was going to be a My the Psychic Girl musical movie? And
Oh
you
God,
know,
no! I didn't
you
know
know
that.
who spent years working on the soundtrack and didn't get anything out of it was Sparks.
Really?
That's why between interior design, the Sparks album from 1992-ish,
Hmm.
all the way to the album with Gratuitous Sex, 1995. That's why there was no Sparks material released. They were working on My the Psychic Girl, and it
That
never happened.
been so awesome.
Tim Burton was going to direct it. It was a whole thing.
That is terrible. You shouldn't have told me. Now I'm I'm
The great lost My
great.
the Psychic Girl musical. I know. My next series that I love is called Foxhole. This was a series that was started by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. They tried to start their own comic book company called Mainline,
Mhm.
and this was one of the premier titles. Look at that cover to
That's
Foxhole
gorgeous.
#1. I mean, it's a day at the beach, Mom.
Yeah, it's for those in the podcast, it's a soldier on the beach with wrecked vehicles and bodies, and his face is all bandaged up. So yeah,
And he's
great.
writing a letter to his mom that says, "Dear Mom, this war is like a picnic. Today we spend a day at the beach." And there's just surrounded by carnage on the beach. Just
Mhm.
great cover. This had a 6-issue run. The first 4 issues were mainline, and then mainline went under, and Charlton picked up the remaining inventory and published it as issues 5 through 7. Another classic cover on issue 3, or is this? No, sorry, this is issue 4. Just a close up of a soldier, the 1,000-yard stare
Mhm.
in his eyes, and just beautiful stuff. I'm very lucky to have a complete run of Foxhole. I got in early. I bought them years ago and just never, through every purge, I kept them. So now they go for thousands of dollars. I'm so glad I never let those go. I just couldn't do it. That was Kirby. It was War. Classic covers. These aren't leaving. So, you know,
Perfect.
if you want to go get Foxhole, get a credit card. That's your loaded. What's your next one?
My next one is a modern book. Well, yeah, it's a modern book. It's called Sarah, from TKO Studios. It's from 2018. My show notes are wrong. You can buy it on tkopresents.com, where I got my copy. It's a graphic novel by Garth Ennis. It is a story of a band of female Soviet snipers. During the Second World War, the Soviets used women in combat roles, unlike the West. And one of the roles that they excelled at was being snipers, because you could be solo, and you could affect a large area by suppressing the enemy troops. As it didn't matter whether you're male or female, the Soviets used you. And so this is a story about a band of female snipers, and it's a very gritty book. And I feel the side of the Soviet Union's in the Soviet Union's story of the Second World War is marginalized in the West, because we don't have personal experience with it for the most part. But this book kind of shows you um, some of the um, some of the ways that the war is fought differently by the Soviets. Human life was less important. Individual life was less important to the Soviets than it was to the West. And you kind of get a feel for that in this story. And love of the father or the motherland was also important. It's a great book. It's not a happy book, um, but it tells a great story, and you get that kind of insight and you of to the characters. Um, you can buy this on eBay, $10, $15. It's well worth it in my opinion. They have a hardcover version of it as well if you want for 50. But no, it's a great story. If you're looking for good story, good art, it's a great book to pick up.
Very in line with my next pick, which is also a female led war title, which was very much a rarity when this happened in the, was it late 50s? Let me see here. 1959. Is that a nine? Yes, I'm old. Star Spangled War Stories, number 84 through 89. This is the story of Mademoiselle Molly, a French resistance
Are they
fighter,
moved?
also known as the Battle Doll. Nothing sexist about that. Mademoiselle Marie. Someone was, all right, let me see. Was it? Yep, Robert Kanigher. There he strikes again. They thought, hey, let's have a female led war comic. So Mademoiselle Marie was the cover feature for these 6 issues. And apparently it did not do well, because then she was bumped aside for a new feature called The War That Time Forgot, where it was soldiers versus dinosaurs. What kid's going to pass that up on the
Wow.
newsstand? But great covers. She's always helping out a soldier, trying to get him across the enemy lines. Awesome Mort Drucker art. You may remember Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine.
Mhm.
He actually drew these. I love this. Is probably my favorite cover of the run. Uh, this is issue 86, where
Not much of it. She didn't change her outfit very often, did she?
I mean, you got to have a look. She had a look: white blouse, tan skirt, heels in wartime.
Yeah,
And of course, because she was French, she had to wear a raspberry beret, the kind you get at a secondhand store, Richard.
yeah, I heard that. I couldn't let a list about war go by without having an honorable mention. That's Mouse, number one, number two. It's a graphic novel about a survivor of the Holocaust as he dictates it to his son. Um, it's they alter it in a very creative way, where uh, the Jews in the story are all mice. The Germans are cats. Americans are dogs. Poles are pigs. And so everyone, there aren't humans to um, to focus on in this story. So it makes it more palatable, I guess, to see piles of bodies when they're piles of mice, right? And I think they make a horrific story like this easier to to absorb. To absorb some of the things that happened in those camps is just it's inhuman, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it. And I think by having that level of abstraction, they help you do that. Really, really, really well written book. It's a very personal book. By This was written by the
Art
man
Spiegelman. Go ahead.
Art Spiegelman, right? It was his father who was telling him this story, and he had to think of a way to be able to. It was such an important story to tell. He wrote and drew this book using animals to portray the characters, and it is a powerful book. It's one of those books that I remember seeing the first book in the bookstore, and I read the book in the bookstore. Didn't even buy the book. I sat there. The only other book I've ever done that with was, gosh, I can't remember, another graphic novel. Anyway, it's really really important book. I think people should read if you want to see a that side. That story told from someone who was there.
I agree. I think anyone who loves comics as literature and an art form, really, you deserve it to yourself to read Mouse, because not only is it a story about the Holocaust and its effect on a family throughout generations, it's a story about a father and a son trying to
Yeah,
connect in some way.
yeah,
And this is the son's way of trying to reach out to a really distant dad that doesn't, he feels he doesn't appreciate him or his art. And the son actually comes around and says, wait a second, dad's been through a lot. Maybe I should cut him some slack here. No spoilers, but it's just really many different levels to this book. There's a reason why it's on every best list ever for graphic novels. And it's sad that this book is one of the first ones to always get censored and pulled from libraries and high schools and things like that, when, this is what people should be reading because it's history. It's a fictionalized history, granted, but Mouse, absolutely. Not traditionally known as a war book, but I think in this case, absolutely it is. It's the war affecting a family and for generations. Yeah, heck yeah, it's a war book. Good mention there, Richard. Um, on that serious note, I have no real clever way to say it's time for the old fart rule. But we're going to
Dear.
do it anyway. The old fart rule for new people around is when we go back 40 years, because we're old farts, to 1983 and talk about the books that shaped Richard and myself. And Richard, I'll let you start this one, but I got plenty to say. Go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we do show notes before the show, and if I get there before John, I pick the book. Um, this week I picked X-Men number 171, 1983. This is the X-Men where Rogue joins the X-Men. Now, you got to remember, before the X-Men, Rogue was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She was a villain. She was a very dangerous villain. She got in the scuffle with Captain Marvel, the female Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. Rogue's powers are, if she touches you, she absorbs your power. If she touches you for a extended period of time, you found out she also absorbs your personality. So she absorbed Carol Danvers, her powers and her abilities and her personality, and she was having a hard time dealing with this, this split personality. Mystique, her adopted mother, didn't care, or was unable to provide the support she needed. So she went to the only people who are out there helping mutants, which were the X-Men, who they had fought. All the X-Men didn't want her on the team. Xavier said it was important that she was on the team, and he was willing to help her. Took some convincing, but eventually she became a really important member of the X-Men. I mean, one of the key members of the X-Men. And her love affair with Gambit is a major storyline throughout the X-Men. Really, really important character. So this is where she joins the team. Keys are, this is 9.8s are pretty inexpensive. $175 for a 9.8. I think it's a great price. At that price, I'd buy a 9.8 over buying Raws. You can buy Raws for around $20, but yeah, I'd stick to the 9.8s.
Several things about this book. Okay. Number one, people forget this was a fill in by Walt Simonson. Walt Simonson drew the cover, drew the inside, is taking the month off for Paul Smith, who was the regular artist. When Rogue was a recurring villain in Dazzler of all titles, she looked like she was 46, and she had a short haircut, and she looked like an old lady, and she terrorized poor Allison Blair, just terrorized her over multiple issues. Very vicious beating. She was not a hero at all. somewhere, someone, I don't know if it was Chris Claremont or somebody else had the idea to bring her to the X-Men. She appears on the mansion steps looking like she's 17, which she's supposed to be all of a sudden. I don't know who her surgeon was, but good job. Maybe Dr. Simonson performed some really good plastic surgery, some fillers. And I don't know, Rogue, people love her. She's not as quite of an accent, a Southern accent masquerading as a character as Gambit is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when they get the two of them together and it's Southern accent versus Louisiana Southern accent, dear Lord, Chris, I just want to read the dialogue. Please
Yeah,
let me read it without all the sugars and affectations and mon cheries and whatever else you're going to throw in there.
it does get thick.
But no, great pick, X-Men 171. Again, a cover that has been homaged over and over again. You know, welcome to this group. Character name. Hope you survive the experience. How many times has that been used on other covers? So,
Right.
kind of a milestone book. All right, moving on to our underrated books of the week. Richard, what do you have here?
Going with the war theme, my pick is Judge Dredd number 18, 19, and 20. Anybody who was a fan of Judge Dredd back in the 80s knows the Apocalypse War saga. This is great. This is a Soviet invasion of Mega City 1, told only as the writers and artists of Judge Dredd could do. It is such a period piece of this art style and genre. It's my go-to Judge Dredd storyline. Whenever feel like rereading Judge Dredd, I pull out the Apocalypse War because it's a nice, clear cut. These issues, you know what's going to happen. It's a cool story. It has humor in it, which is unusual for Judge Dredd. Um,
They've
and
always had a wink and a nod at Judge Dredd. There's been,
yeah, well, Walter, his robot, he has a robot, and he has a landlord as well, and they play a role in this. And that's hilarious as his robot tries to save his landlord. Um, it's a great book. It features different battles in the war, where the Soviet bloc is trying to take over Mega City, how Mega City repulses their attack, and then the ultimate climax. Obviously, Mega City survives. It's a great series of books. It's um, not expensive. You can get these books at about $20 a piece. It's been packaged in graphic novel form as well if you want to buy that. But frankly, at $20, buy the original books. Then you can read it in the format on the crappy newsprint that these things were printed on, and enjoy it as it was originally intended.
take it close and smell
No, hey, the smell of comics is a thing to be reckoned with.
the full sensory experience. I agree. Wrapping up our war episode is my underrated book of the week, and that is, drumroll, Our Fighting Forces number 123, which is the first issue of this title to feature the losers. The losers, comprised of characters Captain Storm, Johnny Cloud, Gunner, and Sarge. They all were in separate books. Captain Storm had his own book, and the others were featured in other war titles. They first appeared as a group, is known as the Born Losers, in the month before this in GI Combat number 138. So this is not the first appearance of the Losers. This is the first issue of the Losers series in Our Fighting Forces. And I imagine they dropped the Born from the Born Losers because of the comic strip with the same name, the Born Loser. They didn't want to have any legal trouble. That's just speculation on my part. But they ran in Our Fighting Forces from issue 123 all the way to the bitter end, issue 181, when the book was a victim of the DC implosion. So, very much a key book, affordable as heck. I bought this very copy today for $20 with a press and a clean. I'm looking at a 9.4, maybe. It looks
Wow.
really good. So, for a first issue, which this basically is, that is a steal. The more recent higher grade slab sale was for a 9.0 in May of 2020 for $200. So next on my list is to get a GI Combat 138. So I have the true first appearance. In all honesty, I grabbed this today thinking this was the first appearance of the losers. And then when I started doing the show notes, I saw story continued from GI Combat 138. So womp womp. But that's our war episode. What is it good for? Absolutely fun.
I do want to thank all of those who are service members. Thank you for your service. Comic books have a way of telling your story, so we immortalize the stories through comics. So,
On behalf of my fellow veterans, you're welcome. Hey, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Bronze and Modern Gods. Hit the website. It'll be updated someday, I swear to God. If you don't like this video, please don't hit thumbs down. Just leave. If you like it, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, and we will catch you next time.
everybody, stay safe.